Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, the ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan, the ambassador of nonsense. Welcome everyone. And by the way, I want to apologize in advance if anyone hears me. I have been at work today. It's about 11:30 now, and I was at work since 7 in the morning. It's 11:30 at night now, and I haven't had a meal. I'd never eat breakfast, and I worked through lunch and didn't stop for dinner. So I'm going to try to quietly nibble, and hopefully it won't pick up.
How far away from work do you live?
About an hour.
Why didn't you just go to a drive-thru on the way home?
Because I wanted to get home and get this done.
Oh, all right.
Besides, then I would have had to eat, something that might not be quiet.
Okay. Well, I guess so. Raymond Arroyo had Cardinal Burke on his show. What's the name of that show? Catholic
World Over?
Yeah. And did an interview with Cardinal Burke, which was pretty good, and addressed a few things that a lot of people are wondering, especially about Traditionalcustodes, how it ought to affect us, and what kind of future is there for the traditional Latin Mass. Now, Cardinal Burke, he had kind of the same optimism that, look, 10 years ago, if you said to a Catholic, to a somewhat educated Catholic, what are you going to do when the Pope changes the teachings on whatever, gay marriage or contraception? The answer was, well, the Pope won't do that.
He can't do it. Yeah, the Holy Spirit won't let him.
Yeah, so it's kind of a general faith in God that this just won't happen. And so far, it hasn't happened. We've had no changes in the teachings of the Catholic Church.
And we know those certain parties in the church have been trying really hard.
Desperately. And it's even gotten to the point where a lot of people at the very top, including the Pope, are more or less kind of giving the okay to ignore the teachings. So they're not trying to change them. They're just, well, we don't have to change them. We just won't listen to them. Doing things that they ought not to be doing. Anyway, that was I felt like that was his attitude towards the traditional Latin Mass. He was saying, look, it's going to be there. God's not going to let him just squelch the TLM. If you've been listening to us in the past year, then you know our position has been that if the Pope wanted to, there's nothing that could stop him from tomorrow saying, listen, no more Latin Masses. All Masses have to be in the vernacular, and you can't have the TLM anymore. From now on, it has to be the Novus Ordo. As far as we can tell, he has the power to do that. I've never seen anything to the contrary. Yeah. And so it's been heavy on our hearts and heavy on the hearts of most traditional Catholics who enjoy going to the Latin Mass, because we recognize how bad it would be for the Catholic Church. Really that's what we went through in the 70s. In the 70s, everybody had the traditional Latin Mass, and then they introduced the Novus Ordo. And as that filtered down over the next year, everybody started celebrating this new Mass. I've heard claims that some people continued to say the old Mass. And of course there were groups like Lefebvre's group, the SSPX, Society of St. Pius X, who specifically set up an order to continue saying it. And then because of certain things like disobedience to the Pope, that group was more or less cut off. They were they became in schism with Rome. And that's the way they've been ever since. But so they're not really considered Catholic. They call themselves Catholic, but most Catholics would not consider them Catholics. The Pope does not consider them Catholics.
Right.
And from the sound of it, Cardinal Burke doesn't consider them Catholics because his encouragement was stay in the church. Don't go to SSPX. Stay in the church and fight this out. Now,
and not, not just because it's important to stay in the church, not just because it's important for souls, but he was trying to make the point we need to not dilute any further the love for the TLM in the mainstream church.
Yeah.
We have to, if we love the TLM, then we need to stand our ground and continue to love it and continue to embrace it wherever we can find it and make it clear that this is a mainstream, that's the word he used.
Right.
We don't want to lose the TLM's popularity within the mainstream church. And if everybody says, oh, it's so hard now, I guess I'll go to SSPX. Well, what that does is kind of give up the field.
And so the people who like the TLM are SSPXers, not traditional Catholics.
Not Catholics, right.
So we can't give up that ground, which, it took us a long time to gain that ground. And I wasn't even alive when they changed the Mass. And so we didn't really see it, but there really wasn't a huge fight to keep the traditional Mass when it changed that I know.
Yeah, everybody just
I mean, some people, but even our own parents, okay, this is the new Mass. All right, we go to the new Mass.
Yeah.
Over time, they started to miss the old Mass and then started movements to try to get it back. And that took a long time. But now we have this retrospect where we can say, this was a disaster. This is the dumbest thing we've ever done. There is no reason to hold on to this. We see what it did. It emptied the churches. So it's dumb to think that we should keep harping on this new Mass.
Doubling down on it is going to fill the churches again? How does that work?
Yeah. And the churches that are being filled, there's kind of like there's two kinds of churches that are being filled. One, traditional churches, whether they have the TLM or not, it's churches that are more traditional. And two, there are priests who are kind of following the same mass Protestant churches, those mega churches, who are kind of following that.
Oh, yeah, the mega church formula, sort of.
And so they're big, but those are fleeting. They won't last. They'll be up quick and down quick because that kind of thing just can't last. It doesn't sustain you spiritually. It satisfies a quick emotional need and then it's gone. And so the only strong church now really is the traditional churches, and the traditional Latin Mass specifically seems to be attracting a lot of young people who are, I'm not even going to, with like Pope John Paul II, they talked about young people being excited for the faith and stuff like that. It's not even that. It's people who are serious about the faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Excitement. It's kind of, excitement is a dangerous word. If you think back to the parable of the sower and the seed that fell, there's actually two kinds of seeds. The seeds that took an initial root, but the soil wasn't very deep. And so when the heat of the day came, they failed. And then the seed that fell among the thorns and they grew up, and then the cares of the world kind of choked, the fortitude out of them and they gave up. And that's what excitement is. But being serious about the faith, that's the seed that fell on good soil.
Yeah. And they're coming in and they're well grounded and they've got kids and they have jobs that they go to. They don't stand on the corner and preach. They're just serious Catholics who take the faith very seriously and learn it and incorporate it into their lives. This is what the traditional Latin Mass is giving us, more than in any other church. And still but it's still such a small percentage that Burke was saying, this is all we've got. We've got 1% of Catholics, maybe. He didn't say 1%, but I've heard that number.
I saw 1% no, I heard it on some other podcast. I thought, wow, 1%. And I thought that sounded high. I was surprised to hear even 1%. But maybe it is. I mean, if it's 1 in 100, 1 in 100 Catholics out there are inclined towards the TLM. Wow. That's, that's amazing. Given where we were.
Given how hard they tried to
been aligned against it.
Yeah. But if that is, then we need that 1%. We can't lose it.
Yeah, we've got to keep them.
To the SSPX. Even if Pope Francis comes out tomorrow and says, no more Latin Mass, we have to stay and we have to find a way to bring it back. We did it before. We could do it again. But Cardinal Burke was optimistic that God would protect the Latin Mass from being killed altogether. And I guess I share his optimism, but I think that it might get kind of weird, It might be one of those things that disappear kind of for a while.
And then comes back or something like that. Yeah, I completely share his optimism that it won't disappear for good. But I'm let's say that I'm hopeful. I share his faith that it won't disappear for good.
Yeah.
But I am hopeful that he's right, that the Holy Spirit would not even allow a pope to completely abrogate it.
Right.
But he's a cardinal. The thing is, he's a cardinal. He knows way more than I do. But saying he's a cardinal in this day and age doesn't mean much.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, I get, it's one of those things we'll have to wait and see. But, there were a couple things that he said. For example, they were responding to, I guess, Raymond Arroyo had brought up a quote from Cupich. That's what I'm calling him, Cupich.
You say his name the way it's spelled.
He had talking about Traditionalcustodes and how he's going to enforce it in his archdiocese, which was, there were a couple stupid things and it seemed arbitrary. It was like, you cannot say the traditional Latin Mass on the first Sunday of every month.
Or on Christmas or during Easter.
That's just
or Pentecost.
That's wrong for so many reasons, but it doesn't matter. It's when he was talking about why he was doing this. He says that he's giving Catholics in the archdiocese, and here I'm quoting, an opportunity to offer a concrete manifestation of the acceptance of the teachings of the Second Vatican Council and its liturgical books. That's so dumb.
That's so lame is the thing. There seems to be this impression that these TLM lovers are like they reject Vatican II or something like that. And thing is, even as if it would even make that much difference if they did, but the truth is they don't. It's like, it's the modern, the modern leftist prelates of the church use this, and this is only something that's started coming up in the last year. I mean, this is a very recent thing, but they've started throwing about this Second Vatican Council, anti-Second Vatican Council thing.
Yeah.
the way leftists in America, maybe around the world, throw racism around. You know, it's like if they want a reason to bully you, they accuse you of rejecting Vatican II, just like leftists accuse you of being a racist. Or if they want an excuse to accrete, power to themselves, they say, oh, because, we've got to be concerned about Vatican II, just like leftists do in America. Oh, because we got to fight racism. But, it's like racism in America is kind of like meteorite strikes, on the ground. It's like, well, okay, you might find one once in a while, but it's neither common enough nor influential enough to bother
to even address,
to make it part of your daily thoughts or plans or anything. Same way with people rejecting Vatican II. Okay, there's this society out there that's outside the church that rejects it. But here, I was thinking about this while I was driving home today. And if you think about even among those few racists you can find in America, half of them are not racist because they somehow inherently believe the races are unequal or something like that. Half of them are racist because they've emotionally and psychologically, they're just reacting against the constant yammering and hammering about racism.
Yeah.
That wasn't even a thing. It's like the constant yammering is pushing people to be racist just as a way of reacting against the stupidity. And
for example, you got, so you've got someone constantly playing the race card. Mm-hmm. And it's not because they're black. It's because the race card is an easy card to play. So, and then you've got a guy next to him who never was racist, but he sees this and then he starts associating it with the race. And it's like,
that must be how they are. And what this is going to do, I mean, this kind of stuff, especially this stupidity of Cupich, I mean, the natural reaction to this is to say, wow, if this much concern over Vatican II turns cardinals, turns bishops into such meanies and makes them so petty and causes them to say, what are intellectually vacuous things, there must be something wrong with Vatican II.
Yeah.
That's the natural reaction to stuff like this.
There's that. And then, there's the fact that most people have not actually read the documents of Vatican II.
In Vatican II.
They don't know what Vatican II says. They really don't care. They only see pre-1970 masses are one way, post-1970 masses are another way, and they see that, and they hear bishops saying, this is Vatican II, so they think, well, Vatican II stinks. Because this is dumb. Yeah. I don't want to go to this. And so that's what happened. And and I guess we've kind of allowed them to control the narrative here, where it's like, hey, this mass has nothing to do with Vatican II. Vatican II did not call for any of this. There's not a single document in Vatican II that calls for these kinds of changes. So, denying Vatican II it's not really a thing. It's like when I argue that, look, the climate changes on its own and, there isn't a whole lot that man can do to destroy it. And people say, well, you're a climate denier.
Yeah.
Or you're
anti-science.
Yeah, you're denying science. It's like, well, I'm not denying science. I just don't think this is the interpretation of the science. I don't think what you think is true. That's not denying science. And no one's denying Vatican II. Especially the people who have read Vatican II documents. I don't think Cupich has.
The people devoted to the TLM who are in the church are far more likely to have actually read Vatican II than the Novus Ordo mass goers.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, but when when you do run into someone who has a problem with Vatican II, they have like 3 or 4 lines out of all the Vatican II documents that they have a problem with. You know, and they're real petty things. It's like, okay, well, you could interpret this like 5 different ways, and yet this is your problem. Why? Because it's ambiguous? Well, so what? The church can be ambiguous. But there's nothing here that you can definitely say is against truth. And the bigger part of this is that there's nothing here that turns the Mass into what we see now. So why are we even talking about this? Why talk about any of the Vatican II documents when that's not where the Novus Ordo came from?
Let's talk about what matters, which is the Mass.
Yeah. We should not allow them to control that narrative to talk about Vatican II, because Vatican II had nothing to do with it. We're not V2 deniers, the same way we're not vaccine deniers or science deniers.
Yeah.
We deny the leftist interpretation that we ought to quit eating meat or ought to receive communion on the hand because of science or because of Vatican II. That was, I think that needs to be made the point more and more often.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that the people with more influence will continue to hammer on that, because this whole Vatican II denial thing, it's just not real.
You know, it's kind of George Orwell recognized the importance of controlling the use of vocabulary in terms of controlling the masses. He recognized how a few people, if they could manage to manipulate the vocabulary used by a population, they could turn it into a population of sheep to be herded whichever way they want them. And the bishops are jumping on that and using that mechanism. I mean, the bishops like Cupich. And I'm sure many others in the church too.
Yeah, it's a shame that people fall for this so easily. And I often wonder why people fall for this. Is it just because I'm unlike most people? The reason I don't go for things like this, is it because of just the way mom and dad raised us, to where we're kind of rebelling against everything we can find to rebel against? Or is there something deeper, like trust in God and, I don't know. It's, how can people be made sheep so easily?
Yeah, I
think it's probably...
I've wondered about that myself. Because it's frustrating when you see people doing that.
Yeah.
It's like you see somebody like Cupich coming out like this, and it's like, this one quote that you read ought to raise every Catholic's hackles. Every single thinking Catholic out there ought to feel a resistance to that. They ought to interiorly rebel against it because of its obvious wrongness and idiocy.
Especially for a guy so powerful.
Well, just, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, this way I can show that I accept Vatican II.
Yeah.
That's what you were looking for in your life, is a way to show that you accept Vatican II?
Because it's the same way that you got people who do the dumbest things to show that they're not racist. You know, you got these white millennial girls who will kiss the feet of black men in order to show that they're not racist, and it's dumb. It's frustrating. It's like you don't have to do that. There's no reason to allow them to control us this way. But I guess that's what it is they're interested in showing people like Cupich and Pope Francis. They want to show them, hey, we're all for Vatican II. when they've never read Vatican II, because if they did, they would know that this has nothing to do with Vatican II.
Yeah. And, it's kind of ironic that, the people who do go out of their way to show that they're not racist do things that show them, in fact, to be racist. The very first thing you have to do in order to take all these measures is to pay attention to race and then treat people differently based on race. Well, that's racism.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same way. And in fact, a lot of the ways that people want to treat black people differently, is not only racist in the sense that they're treating them differently, but there's a underlying assumption that black people can't stand on their own 2 feet and they need to be treated differently. They need to be treated specially. They need to be given extra privileges because they're not capable in and of themselves the way, for example, white people might be. That's kind of the underlying current of worldview that drives these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing applies here. If you have to hammer Vatican II down everybody's throats, if you have if you have to make acceptance of Vatican II a thing like this, then what you're admitting is that, in your own opinion, Vatican II really doesn't stand on its own. Now, I think it does. I think it does, and I've read the Vatican II documents, and I rarely think about Vatican II. But those who are constantly harping on it, those are the ones that you suspect, well, wait a minute, maybe you really think that Vatican II can't stand on its own, because maybe in your mind, Vatican II really is a break with tradition, and maybe that's what it's all about for you. That's the disturbing aspect of this.
It's one of those things that there are a lot of ambiguities in there, but there's no reason you couldn't read Vatican II in light of tradition and say there's nothing ground shaking here. There's no game changers in this. It's pretty much more of the same. Or if you were of a mind to try to change what the church is, then you can read it. Actually, it isn't that ambiguous. There aren't a whole lot of places you could do this. But if you're down and determined, you could read some things and say, look, this says we ought to be doing something different.
Yeah.
But you can only do that if you already don't believe in the church's infallibility.
Right. Because, that's the thing about Vatican II is that I wonder if Vatican II was strategized by, I don't know, by demon, by Satan, by the forces of evil, to be a tiny wormhole.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is this: for the most part, you can take Vatican II, and if you read it in the light of tradition and in continuity with tradition, you can then discard it because it doesn't add anything to the tradition. It doesn't illuminate any further. It doesn't bring it out in any greater relief, with just one or two exceptions. But for the most part, you can just drop it, and as long as you have the whole tradition of the church, you don't even need Vatican II. It's
right.
The one exception is that it called for a reform, not a total reform. It called for a reevaluation of the parts of the Mass with some particular reforms. And that, while the document itself doesn't in any way resemble what came out of, the reforms of Paul VI, the Mass, it became the point where the worm, as an evil figure here, could wiggle through and accomplish this big reform of the Mass that was really for the worse, and we've already seen has wrought destruction in a lot of parts of the church.
That
so it's almost
did
like
happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, the documents are all fine, they're all good. If you take them and follow them, for the most part, you can ignore them because they don't really say anything new. And if you followed the reforms as actually written, you would have a mass that looks a lot like the TLM, but there's just that one small point that it did call for a reform. And then it's like, okay, let's seize on the word reform and ignore all the rest of the words in the document and go write this new mass.
Yeah.
And that's what they did.
Yeah. And it destroyed the church on a practical level. It cut everything off. It turned people ignorant, and it almost made the Catholic Church irrelevant in the modern day, because if you don't have the faith, then the Mass doesn't benefit you. And since even Catholics have lost their faith, if only 30% believe in the real presence of the Eucharist, that means the rest of them have lost their faith, and if they have, then the Mass isn't doing anything for them.
Yeah.
So that was the fruit of this change. It wasn't the fruit of Vatican II, it was the fruit of this change, which they used Vatican II as an excuse to do. But I guess the big thing is we're not V2 deniers.
No.
And we shouldn't let that be the argument.
We need to find a way. I mean, how to get people to use a different set of terms when
because it's
discussing the TLM. Leave Vatican II out of it.
It's not pre-Vatican II. It's pre-Paul VI. I don't know. But it can't be about Vatican II. That's not what the argument is.
I almost think that it would be a good thing to start referring to the Mass of Paul VI, the Novus Ordo, as a liturgical experiment. That, because in the church, I mean, okay, it's been around for 50 years. In the church, that's the blink of an eye. That's nothing.
Right, it's not that long.
So it's like, it's an experiment. Well, it's time to recognize that the experiment has failed, or the experiment has produced a result that says this is the wrong way to go with the Mass.
Yeah.
So if we could start getting that vocabulary out there and start making the conversation not about Vatican II, but about liturgical experimentation, which is what the Mass of Paul VI was, that's how to start getting people to think rightly about it.
Yeah.
Of course, we need some influential people to start doing that.
Two guys on a podcast aren't going to do it, but I don't have too much more after that.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay.
Which is fine. It's okay for this to be a short one.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about news.
Yeah.
2 men are arrested in Manchester, Birmingham, England, as part of that hostage situation at the synagogue in Texas. So it doesn't really say what their involvement was, but apparently, I mean, the way it was presented last week when I talked about it, it was one guy who had a brother in prison, and he took over he took a synagogue hostage and demanded his brother be set free.
Right.
But here's these 2 guys in England that were arrested as part of that. So apparently this was a little bit more planned, and I guess it wasn't a crazy guy trying to get his brother sprung.
Does it say what? But it doesn't go into what their involvement was. Just
no, it doesn't. Yeah, it was just arrested for involvement of that. Another part of this
news stories that are teasers like that.
Yeah. Where was it? Let me see here. The FBI announced that it's going to call this a federal hate crime and an act of terrorism.
Uh-oh.
Which, I mean, why are we why is it a hate crime?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Once you allow, the very concept of a hate crime is a wrong-headed concept anyway.
Yeah.
The act, the motive is part of making your case to a jury. It's part of the presentation. It's part of the evidentiary, proof that you bring.
Yeah.
But it's not an element of the crime. The crime is the crime. The act that you committed is what it is, regardless of what your motive is. A motive can be mitigating, but not. It should never be exacerbating. It's like, okay, I shot a guy. Well, okay, what were the circumstances? The circumstances were that he was crawling in through my window with a knife in his hand, and my wife was on the other side of the bed, and I, feared that he would reach her first and do harm to her, so I shot him. Okay, circumstantially, that constitutes self-defense, but the motive shouldn't be something that you say, oh, you did it for this reason, therefore that's an additional crime, or anything like that. The very idea of hate crimes is one of the most dangerous things, and now that people have grown comfortable with the concept.
Now they just start throwing it around.
It gets abused.
In this case, it seems like it's even as something that shouldn't be there at all, it's especially misplaced.
Yeah.
When the guy wasn't saying anything about Jews when he took them hostage. He wasn't expressing hatred of Jews as far as I can tell. And I read some about it, and there are news reports that he did not say anything hateful about Jews. So why is this a hate crime?
What was the back on the original theory of the hostage situation? What was his brother in prison for?
He is a Pakistani who is in jail for attempted murder and other felonies.
Okay,
it doesn't say.
So he wasn't necessarily in jail for crimes against Jews or anything like that. So it's like the guy. Assuming the original theory that he was doing it to get his brother out, which now no longer seems even to be the right theory.
Yeah.
It seems like he just decided that a synagogue was the easiest place to get a bunch of people hostage. It's easier to take over a synagogue, say, than hijack a plane or something like that.
Wait a minute.
What?
Wasn't his brother that was supposed a Pakistani national serving an 86-year sentence? But they're showing a picture of a woman here. I thought it was maybe he's the brother.
Oh, he's the brother of a Pakistani national.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just assumed it was a.
So he's trying to get his sister out of jail.
I assumed it was a guy. You would assume something like that, but
you think, okay, yeah, you're in jail for violent crimes and murder and stuff. You're probably a guy.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So new wrinkles in the case.
Maybe he's not. Why did I think that was his brother?
I don't know. That's what you said last week, though.
I might erase this whole conversation. I don't know why I thought this guy was.
You know what? You can't erase it because you said it last week.
Yeah. We're forgetting a 5 minute. I don't know why I thought this was the guy's brother, but I guess I was just way off on that. Okay.
You know what? Without
right.
identifying, I would have assumed too. It said the brother of a Pakistani national. I would have assumed that the Pakistani national was also a guy.
All right. Well, anyway, so I guess the Red Cross was hacked and a whole bunch of personal data was stolen from them.
Why do they have a bunch of personal data?
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess they collect some when they, help people or whatever.
Yeah. They are making personal appeals to the hackers to come forward and turn themselves in. Okay.
I approve what the Red Cross does, but yeah, that's a bit naive.
Here's the thing about the Red Cross is that they the business of blood is kind of a big business.
Mm-hmm.
And the Red Cross does not pay for blood. And they've kind of taken over the whole industry.
They don't pay for blood. Do they get paid for blood?
They do sell it. It's not like anytime you get blood from the Red Cross, you're buying it. But they make money on it.
Okay.
So it's...
but don't organizations like Hawksworth and stuff like that too?
Yeah, they do, but they also have to pay for the blood.
Oh, because I thought they just like ran donation, like donation blood drives and stuff.
They
like,
do have occasional blood drives, but most of their blood is from bums coming in off the street and getting $200 for a
they get
pint
their
of blood.
They give their blood and they get paid $35 or whatever, and then I know a guy in college who would do that to get extra money. He could only do it every so often because you can't keep pulling all your blood out. But he would go down to the center and donate plasma, get $35 every time he did it.
I think it's something like $200.
Okay, well the price has changed.
I think it's a bit of money.
I mean, come on, this was 30 years ago.
Right.
Aaron.
Hold on. Huh?
Back night when we first got married.
Yeah.
A pint, the bag.
Yeah.
$10,000.
$10,000 going to who? Huh?
So we charged $10,000.
Even when Red Cross was involved?
I don't know where we got our blood. I never dealt with it.
So when Vicky was at ICU, if you needed blood, you would get charged for it. And the charge was around $10,000 for one pint, for one bag.
$10,000 a pint?
$10,000. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what the bill to the insurance would get,
Yeah.
And I think the Red Cross gets money like that. They have blood. They can't use the blood. There are no wars going on right now where they need tons of blood, yet they're collecting all this blood. And the hospitals are selling it. There has to be... A lot of that blood is coming from Red Cross.
Pint.
So where do you think... If that's what the customer's getting charged... That money's going somewhere. Obviously, the Red Cross is getting money off
Some of it, yeah.
So you're going in, giving them a pint of... They have these huge blood drives where they collect gallons of blood, and it ends up in the customer at $10,000 a pint. That's... I don't know all the movement of blood behind that and where the money moves and stuff like that. I'm just saying... There's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And Red Cross is not this charitable organization that we think of it when people are getting $10,000 for a pint of blood.
Oh, yeah.
So they're paying
Although...
$75 for people who need money. It's $75 for a bag of blood. For the plasma, it's $200. Plasma goes for twice the amount.
What are you talking about? For...
Red Cross will give people who donate blood.
Oh, okay.
It's like $75 for blood, like $200 for plasma.
I didn't know Red Cross gives people money.
Yeah.
I guess they do. They do buy it sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So
they'll set up in a
like other places. Okay.
But I know I know people who have gotten $200 for blood.
I mean, I know that every time they take blood, every sample of blood that they take, they have to take some and send it out to labs for testing and that kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing. Costs. Because so if you have a blood drive,
I tried to go once. They were in a parking lot at work.
Yeah,
and I thought, okay, I'll walk over and give blood. So I signed up for a slot and got up, when it was time. And it turned out that it was a really cold, windy day. Well, you know me, I don't carry a coat.
Yeah.
So it was a really cold, windy day, and the van ended up being... It's like they couldn't get the spot that they were supposed to get, which was kind of close to our door. And they were way across, like, in the neighboring parking lot. So I walked all the way over, and first thing she said is, well, I need your driver's license. I didn't think to bring a driver's license.
Yeah.
I was so disgusted, I went back.
I just went back to work.
Why on earth do you need my driver's license? You're going to test my blood no matter who I am. Why do you need my driver's license?
Yeah. Well, so, okay, they take a pint and a little bit more, send all that out to be tested, which costs money.
Yeah.
And they end up getting, say, a pint of blood.
Yeah.
But let's say these places downtown that collect it, generally you get a card, and you have that card saying, I've been tested for all these diseases and I don't have the diseases. And I think there's a different amount of testing your blood gets when you have that card, and that's why they're able to say, all right, we'll give you $200 a pint. Because you've already been tested, they don't have to do as many tests every time you give.
Oh, especially genetic diseases that it's not like could possibly pick them up. You've been tested, you don't have these genetic defects. And then all they got to do is test for infectious diseases.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Sense.
It's just knowing that nobody gets free blood in a normal working world, other than guys who are in the army and need it in order to stay alive. Yeah. Those are the people that the Red Cross was originally started for. But that doesn't happen anymore. We don't need that. So why does the Red Cross exist other than to sell blood?
But is the Red Cross, I mean, I know I've heard it referred to as
they do other
American
stuff,
Red Cross. Mm-hmm. But my question is it an American organization specifically, or is it international? It
started during the Civil War. I think there are. I don't think it's purely American anymore.
No,
but
it
was started by a bunch of nurses in the Civil War.
Okay.
Taking care of soldiers.
Yeah.
Who it was like there was no medical facilities to help these soldiers who were having their legs blown off.
Right.
And the Red Cross was a part of that. That's it's actually, as little as I know about the story, it is an amazing story. Mm-hmm. Of amazing women who went to work to help soldiers. And I wish I could say more about it than that. But anyway, how'd we get on this?
Because of the personal information that was stolen from the Red Cross.
Oh, yeah. So they want whoever stole all this information, please turn yourselves in and be indicted and go to jail. But all they did was stole personal data. Who cares? Why do they care?
Well, because they'll sell that data to people who will use it for identity fraud and stuff like that. Identity theft.
Okay, what kind of data do they have about people?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, it's like, what do you got, like credit card numbers, social security numbers and stuff?
Who has AIDS? And I want to steal the identity of a guy with medical problems.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
There's that. I mean,
okay,
let's say
they take donations.
Number. Okay, so you get
but they take donations, so they probably do have some credit card data.
Well, it could be.
Because people donate money, don't they?
Even a driver's license number. You might be able to use that, for example, online to order a birth certificate.
Yeah.
Except, send it to this place because this is where I live now. My, driver's license is old or whatever. Well, now then you can use that and leverage that into some other kind of identity and stuff like that. So I could see where it would be concerning.
Yeah. The French Constitutional Council approved the COVID-19 vaccine pass law. But they did change part of it. They rejected the mandatory use of vaccine pass for political rallies. So you need the pass in order to get on the bus and do pretty much everything.
Go to a restaurant,
except for
visit the museum,
going to a political rally.
So that's kind of interesting because those political rallies might be the mechanism by which the whole thing gets reversed anyway.
Yeah. U.S. State Department tells its diplomats and pretty much everyone, leave Ukraine.
Things are heating up.
We're getting people out of Ukraine. United Kingdom is also getting people out of Ukraine. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announces the extension of Operation Unifier for 3 years.
What's Operation Unifier?
Operation
that sounds
Unifier.
So stupid.
This is the dumbest, gayest thing I've ever heard. 60 more troops will be deployed to Ukraine in the coming days. 60 more troops from
60?
Canada.
60?
60 troops.
What for? What are 60 troops going to do?
For Operation Unifier.
They're going to unify
Trudeau's
something?
going to unify Ukraine and Russia, I guess. This guy's
with
the biggest.
60 troops?
The biggest, most
Russia
useless,
has amassed like 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border.
I don't know how you could be any more useless than Trudeau. He also announced a shipment of non-lethal equipment and intelligence sharing.
A shipment
Why would you
of
announce the
intelligence sharing?
shipment of
What's that?
non-lethal equipment?
What are
they going to do with non-lethal equipment?
Vehicles or
Here's
something?
blankets. That's what we did with Ukraine back during Obama's. Yeah, we would ship them we would promise them all these anti-tank missiles, and then we'd ship them a bunch of blankets.
Blankets? Oh gosh, yeah.
I don't know. This guy, there's this guy in the German Navy who resigns as the inspector because of all this, what he's calling nonsense over this Russian and Ukraine problem. He's saying that Vladimir Putin would not do this and is not going to do this, and that everybody's just kind of overreacting.
Yeah, but in Germany's benefiting from the Russian that new pipeline. So of course Germany's going to try to downplay any buildup. They're going to try to resist any buildup of preparation against Russian action.
Yeah. And as Ukraine tries to join NATO, he is against that and the way Russia is. So,
of course.
I don't know. We'll see what happens over there. Tropical storm Anna kills 23 people in Madagascar.
Wow.
Yeah, so Anna, that would make it the first one. And 23 people in Madagascar. Okay, this is cool. James Webb Space Telescope successfully enters orbit at its target location.
Awesome.
So this telescope is like the replacement of Hubble.
Yeah.
It can see things 100 times darker than Hubble could.
Oh, wow.
And it's able to observe like high redshift objects, which
like
is how we tell what kind of speed. What kind of speed things are taking as they go away or towards us. Important as we try to map out where things are and stuff like that, and tell all kinds of other information about them, like how big they are. The thing about this is that it's going to be used. It's going to be used for very fine details, whereas Hubble was the first space telescope that gave us a good view of everything. So the imaging we get from Hubble is fantastic and worthy to make big posters and stuff like that out of.
Yeah.
Whereas this is going to be a lot more technical in nature.
Oh, okay.
And this is going to be more about discovery of the nature of the things we already know. I mean, we will see new things, but they won't look as cool.
No, so the images won't be as spectacular, but the information that we can get from them will be very exciting.
Yeah, 100 times
looking forward to
more
it.
Powerful. That's incredible. Speaking of satellites, the second stage of Falcon 9 version 1.1 is projected to impact on the moon on March 4th, 2022. Now, it was a deep space satellite that it started out with the they wanted to use it to detect solar storms and magnetic storms from the sun.
Okay.
Which, I don't know, when there's a solar storm on the sun, how much time, even if we knew it immediately, how much time do we have really to react to that? I mean...
Yeah, so like how fast do the solar storm particles... Because you're really talking about like charged like proton particles or something like that. But
I don't know. I mean, does it go as fast as light? I guess it must be going slower than light.
Not as fast as light, but I mean, light is like 8 minutes. So let's say it's like 1/10 the speed of light. That would be
still,
an hour and a half.
So it's not like we're going to have a week to prepare for some kind of solar storm. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have something like that. But then it was proposed that we use this to observe climate change and study climate change. And I think the information that is retrieved by the satellite would be visible to everyone, if I'm understanding this right.
Okay.
Which is what a lot of those instruments are that way when put up there by NASA.
Yeah, when NASA does it, they pretty much share everything. So it's only got another. You said 2022 or 2023?
2022. So it'll be landing on the moon in another month or two.
Now, the first time you said it, you said impact. Is it going to be a landing, or is it going to be more like a crash?
Oh, no, I think it's supposed to land on the moon, and then we would use it from there to monitor, quote, climate.
I see.
I mean, what...
Okay.
I don't... It might be something that is important when it comes to things like predicting weather. Mm-hmm. But I have a feeling they are kind of dressing it up as a way to study climate change, when really it does have a practical purpose.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't believe that... I just don't believe that we need to study climate change. I don't think it is changing enough to study the way they're saying it is. And I hear so many things from so many people that I've kind of just turned that whole thing off. It's like, I'm sorry, you wouldn't have to lie about this stuff if it was true. So
yeah,
it's like the COVID argument. It's like, if any of this was true, then we wouldn't have to be talking about this, and I wouldn't have to ask for an explanation for these lies that we know happened. So, whatever. I don't understand why they put this much money into something like that unless there is an actual practical way to use it.
Which weather seems a lot more practical than climate.
Yeah, and it seems more practical than monitoring solar storms.
Yeah.
So...
maybe that's where we'll go. I mean, maybe they'll pick up on ability to predict tropical storms.
Yeah. The Australian government announces that it has purchased the intellectual property rights to the Australian Aboriginal flag from its designer for over $20 million. That's got to be the weirdest thing I have ever heard.
Why?
That's like
I
guess
if the what was the big the 5 nations or whatever, the American Indians and the and they are the 5
like the Iroquois and
there were the 5 that got together sort of, right? And so let's say they made a flag and they had some guy design a flag for them, and then the U.S. government says, "Oh, we'll pay you $20 million for the intellectual property rights to your flag." That's so stupid.
They're allowing public use of the flag, but the fact that maybe this is just worded funny, and maybe the real story is the Australian government paid a designer to make a flag for this purpose, and this.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's more like, hey, we need to bring attention to our native Aboriginal populations. I know. Let's have a flag designed.
maybe that's
and they paid him
happened.
$20 million. That could be.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. So in Canada, the National Assembly voted to criminalize conversion therapy.
Oh, gosh.
Get for 3 years
Yeah.
in prison and something like $45,000 in fines. If a gay person, including your own child, says, I'm gay, I don't want to be gay, and you try to help them, then you
get fined
are going to
and
jail.
put in jail. Wow.
So,
Yeah, Canada's been kind of on the forefront of the militant gay agenda
yeah.
for a couple of decades now.
Yeah. Speaking of gay, okay. I had to read this like 5 times before I finally understood what they were saying. A California trans child molester. In other words, a trans
A
person.
molester of trans children?
No,
Or a trans who molests children?
a trans who molested children,
Okay.
who is 26 years old, 26, gets
Yeah.
2 years in juvenile
Juvie?
for his crime.
Oh, he gets
So-
to be put with all the kids?
Yeah. So this guy, okay,
Only in
here's the
California.
thing. This guy was arrested when he was 17, just turning 18. At the time, he was a man. And I don't know why, but here we are 10 years later, punishing him for this. But they would not try him as an adult or as a man. Now, he molested I think it was a 10-year-old. He went to the girl's bathroom, if I'm understanding. Yeah, molesting a girl in the women's bathroom 8 years ago when he was 2 weeks away from turning 18.
And claims
At the
that
time,
claims that he's a woman.
He was a man. Well, when he was arrested, he did not identify himself as a woman. But then when he was in there, he said, I'm a woman. So now he's a woman who is going to go to juvie. I assume girls' juvie.
Wow.
At 26 years old, a 26-year-old man is going to go
Molested
to a
little
girls' unless those places are juvie or are co-ed, but I don't think they are. Generally, they keep the girls and the boys apart. So otherwise,
So he gets
well,
to
you
go
know
to
what
girls'
happens.
Juvie.
Yeah,
Boy,
he grabbed a 10-year-old by the throat, locked her in a stall, and put his hand down the girl's pants. This is during that time when everybody was fighting, saying, no, you can't let boys go into the girls' bathroom. This is just sick.
Oh, man.
This is California.
That's California for you.
Yeah. So, I guess AOC has a Republican challenger in the whatever election is coming up, and he is demanding the death penalty for cop killers. I bring this up because the problem of cop killing has gotten a lot worse in the past several years. And we talked about it a little bit last week. And I don't why should you get a death penalty if you're a cop killer and not a citizen killer?
Yeah.
You know? On the one hand, we're saying we don't need cops. We're saying cops are bad. And on the other hand, we're saying we should put to death people who kill cops. And then you got people like us who are like, well, okay, if the cops are that important, I don't know.
It's a lot
whole
of
subject
inconsistency.
On both sides.
Yeah.
And I just would again say the entire police force needs to be changed. It's not what it should be, but it very well could be one of those things that it's always going to have a certain amount of problems. And I imagine 1,000 years ago, the police forces who tried to maintain control in a city, who was called who would go and arrest people for robbing a place or for beating up an innocent person, those cops probably did the same things that they do today, where they're kind of a lot of them were probably thugs who took advantage of the authority that they had and accepted bribes and stuff like that. And then there were some good ones, but there were also a lot of bad ones. I wonder if it could ever be anything different.
I kind of don't think so. Not, just kind of the way people are.
Yeah. And unless you had a really good, say, mayor or governor, that's probably how it goes. And that mayor or governor would have to be very devoted to cleaning up the force. And then the second that mayor or governor is gone, then you got the problem back again.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that maybe it's a little bit less prevalent these days where, like, police forces, most police departments have an official internal affairs division. And so it's, maybe it's a little bit less prevalent than, say, 1,000 years ago. But
or even in, say, the 70s, before anyone heard of Serpico,
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all the news I got.
Okay, well, I've got a little bit, but it is honestly a slow, weird news week, too.
Yeah.
However, this is kind of gross. Patient was complaining about pain in his ear, and the doctor finds a cockroach inside of his ear.
Oh, that's terrible.
I know.
I thought that was like a urban legend.
Urban legend kind of a thing, yeah. It's like
because you hear about things like that, or like that, and then there's one I think where like an ant laid its eggs in someone's nasal cavity.
Yeah, I remember
stories
like that from when we were kids.
Yeah, I was scared to death of an ant laying its eggs in my ear or in my nose or something. But okay, so got into his ear. That gives you the chills. That's terrible.
The thing is, I've got this picture of the doctor with like these two needle-looking things sticking down in the guy's ears. These scary-looking quasi-surgical instruments, although it's not really surgery because he's not cutting. I know that my wife, an audiologist, could easily get a cockroach out of a guy's ear without anything as scary as that.
Tweezers. Unless maybe it was...
tweezers, but I mean, she's got, like they've got these little things that have like suction on them, and you could grab a hold of them, pull it out, stuff like that. It's...
I wonder if the thing was still alive.
It was kicking. It kept kicking and like bumping up against his eardrum.
Oh, yeah.
Causing pain.
Gosh. Yeah. It was there for 3 days.
Yeah.
That's
so gross.
Didn't he? I get maybe he lived alone or something. Because, see, I would think if I had this problem with my ear hurting, I would get my wife and say, will you look in here? Is there something going on here? Because there's something wrong. It feels bad.
Yeah.
And then my kids might do the same thing, and I would just get a pair of tweezers and say, hey, you got something in here, and then I'd pull it out.
Mm-hmm. Although, all the way down by your eardrum, that'd be kind of hard to reach with tweezers.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well.
Next guy. This is an Iranian guy, and I think that he just cheated and went and got like a double COVID vaccine because he broke the Guinness World Records for balancing the most spoons on his body. 85 spoons in various locations at the same time.
Okay, I'm seeing a picture of him. He's got, some of them are on places like his arms.
Belly, yeah. And it's like,
how do you balance the next spoon on you when you're moving the part that already has spoons on it?
Maybe somebody else is balancing them.
He didn't even put one on his nose.
He said, I know, he could have got one more.
That's
86.
the most popular one. Everybody puts them on their nose.
I accidentally noticed this talent of mine when I was a kid. After multiple years of practice, I was able to strengthen my talent, develop it where it is now.
Strengthen my talent. I would never tell anyone
is that
was
what you would
talent.
call it, a talent?
Yeah.
I'd call it get a life.
Yeah. looks so proud of himself.
The prior record was 64 spoons by a guy in Spain.
I'll bet that guy had one on his nose.
Probably.
Well, no. Well, it's an even number, so maybe not.
Well, that's true.
Maybe
have them symmetrical or whatever.
Okay, but here's the thing. I'm looking at him. I would also... Look, you could put one on his nose. You could put one behind each of his ears.
Yeah, stick one behind
There's all kinds of places you could put more than that.
A couple on his biceps. But the thing is, the way... It's like, clearly they're just like sticking to his skin the way they would to your nose.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's a rule that they have to be outward facing. Because, when you put them on your nose, it's always like inward.
They're inward, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway. So, last item. Sometimes you just can't do anything about bad timing except apologize. Now, the singer and sometimes American actor Meatloaf?
I know the name, but I don't know any of his songs.
Probably his most popular / famous song is Paradise by the Dashboard Lights, which is a song where the guy's singing, I could see paradise by the dashboard lights. Okay, you can imagine what's going on. But the girl is like, hey, no, you gotta marry me, or you gotta at least promise to marry me, spend the rest of your life with me. We gotta be together to the end of time, and that kind of stuff. So finally he breaks down, gives in, and then the last piece of the song is both of them are waiting to the end of time because they can't stand each other anymore. So, anyway, that's just one song. Probably his most popular, though. The style is, I guess, what you would call operatic rock. Anyway, he passed away. And that same week, Weber Grill, who is, they send out their recipe of the week. Well, just coincidentally, the recipe of the week that week was barbecue meatloaf.
Oh, okay.
So they had to send out an apology.
How many people really cared?
Probably none. But it's still a interesting twist on the death of a popular, somewhat popular figure. Probably more cult popular than full popular. You know what I mean? It's like most people probably have heard of him, but don't really know anything.
Yeah, like me. I will say that Weber makes a good grill, though.
Do they? All right.
I mean, I've only bought a couple grills, and I noticed that, they have this real nice one with all this stuff on it for, say, $250. Right. And then you can buy the same with $250. You can buy a Weber that's much smaller and has maybe like half as much room on it.
Oh.
And I, of course, bought the big one because
in a year.
Yeah, in a year it was like all rusted out. Whereas I found a Weber in the garbage and I took it and used it for like 3 or 4 years. So
okay, that's actually pretty good when you can pull it out of the trash and then use it for 3 or more.
Get more use of it.
Years.
Yeah. So they make a good solid grill. I'll say that.
Okay. Well,
but now I'm in love with my Blackstone. So.
Well, yeah.
All right.
That's all I got. Like I said,
that's all we got.
Slow news week.
Yeah. Well, we wanted it to be quick, but I do have a saint.
Cool.
Saint Isaac Jogues.
Oh, okay.
Died in 1646 here in the Americas.
Yep. He was a missionary to the Iroquois, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Iroquois and the Mohawks are kind of a section of the Iroquois, or part of the Iroquois. Mm-hmm. And he was killed by a Mohawk, but he was at the age of 10, he went to school with the Jesuits. At the age of 17, he went to a seminary to start learning to become a priest. He was finally ordained when he was around 29. It was in 1636. And right away, he wanted to come to America. That's what he wanted to do, is come to New France, which was Canada.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to come here and be a missionary to the Indians. And he did. Mostly, they were trying to convert the Iroquois. That was the big thing. The Iroquois Confederacy, which was a combination of like 5 different groups. The Hurons were the ones who were most easily converted. But even them, we would come here and we would start teaching them, and there would be a number of converts, and then there would be a plague.
Oh.
And the Americans, or the Europeans, were blamed for these plagues, which rightly so, because they were our plagues, but it's not like we're doing it on purpose. But so these Indians are introduced to these new germs that they didn't have before, and it killed a lot of them. So but he kept at it, and it was a long time before he was finally accepted by the different tribes. And it got to a point where most of the tribes would accept him when he came. Because they knew that he wasn't there just to sell something or to buy something. He wasn't there for commerce, which a lot of the Europeans were. And so he for like 6 years, he taught the Hurons mostly, but any Indians, and eventually he was taken prisoner. I guess it was by a group of, I don't know which tribe actually took him prisoner. I think they were Iroquois, but I don't know if they were Mohawks.
Oh, okay.
He remained a prisoner for a couple years, I guess. It was almost 2 years, I think. He was taken prisoner along with 6 others. There were several times where he could escape, but he didn't. As a matter of fact, this isn't actually verified, but originally when he was taken prisoner, he had seen his friends being taken, and he wanted to be there with them to comfort them, and so he gave himself up, and got out of the bushes so that he could be a part of that prison. And he has a diary in which he describes a lot of the tortures. And when you read about them, they would do things like they would chew on his fingers until they were a pulp. I think one woman finally cut off one of his thumbs. They would have the kids throw coals on him from the fire or poke him with burning sticks. This has gone over quickly as if it's a small thing. Whenever he went from one village to another, he would have to run the gauntlet. Most people don't know how severe gauntlets are. A lot of times, these are, a line of, say, the villager, everyone in the village lined up on either side for sometimes a half a mile. It's everyone lined up.
Wow.
And they're armed with sticks.
I was picturing like maybe 24 people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
When people talk about it, that's kind of what you think. But it's not that. It's a big thing. They're lined up sometimes a half a mile long.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule is you start at the beginning and you have to walk. If you stop or if you turn around, you get killed.
Oh my. Wow.
So, and if you fall, then they beat you generally until you're senseless and pass out. Sometimes they'll let you live if you fall.
If you fall, because you went until yeah.
Yeah, but if you keep going and you get to the end, then you're allowed to live. But they would have him run gauntlets every time he
if you get to the
entered
end,
into it.
Did they have do they have respect for you and stuff?
Generally they do.
Okay.
But
gosh,
in this case, he was a prisoner, and he was never given that adoption type attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be because he never made it through the gauntlet. It might be because he always fell at some point or another.
Yeah.
But and they, they were armed with sticks, clubs, sometimes burning sticks.
Mm-hmm.
They would stab. They did all kinds of things.
Man.
It was a grotesque thing. It itself was its own torture. He was suspended on spikes at one point for several days, I think, until some woman had pity on him, and her and another guy, another one of the Indians, got him down from that. And I think it's said that the guy who got him out of that torture apparatus was eventually accepted baptism from him. But throughout his captivity, he heard confessions, he baptized Indians who were willing, and he did everything he could for the other prisoners and and you got to remember the other prisoners, some of them were Jesuits like himself.
Right.
A lot of times, though, there were other tribes that had been, they would go to war with someone and then take some of them prisoners. And so not all the other prisoners were white men. There were other Indians along with them. He eventually escaped, and there's a guy who helped him escape, but it was only after, first of all, the other prisoner that he had stuck with, because he had the opportunity to escape several times, but he didn't want to leave his other prisoner alone. It was obvious, first of all, the guy had said, no, you have to go, because it was obvious they were going to kill him no matter what. And him being there wouldn't help him at all. So finally he did escape. He goes all the way back to France. He received special permission to say Mass because one of his thumbs was missing, but the other fingers were so gnarled up that he couldn't use them to hold the Eucharist.
The host or anything. Wow.
So he had to have special permission from Pope Urban VIII, who called him a living martyr and gave him that dispensation. He goes back to New France, and he is killed by a young Mohawk man. He was walking through a doorway, and the guy just plugged him with a tomahawk in the head, and that's how he died.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if we call him a martyr.
I mean, like, was it like a martyrdom, like religiously motivated or anything? It
was part of an anti-French faction within the Mohawk community.
Okay, so
we don't necessarily know if he was even a prisoner at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was there to. I can't find anything about whether or not he was a prisoner at the time. But he was eventually killed by a Mohawk with a hatchet who he wasn't expecting his death. I guess we call him a double martyr because he went through the imprisonment and all the torture, and he did everything but become a martyr.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to France, and then he goes back where he finally receives his martyrdom.
Yeah.
I think he's called a martyr even though technically he isn't actually a martyr, because I don't think when he was finally killed, I don't think it was out of hatred of the church. It was more out of hatred of France.
Mm-hmm.
But
if it was because of France's work in spreading Christianity, it could be one and the same.
Which is what there were two parts to France's settling in these areas. First of all, you had you had the same thing you had in America. You had colonies, French colonies, who were trapping animals, cutting down lumber, and doing all the things that you do in America to start taming the land. And then, but they also sent out a lot of missionaries.
Yeah.
Unlike England, France and Spain both sent out a lot of missionaries that did a lot of work to help the Indians and to begin to spread the faith. It didn't really work out for those Indians who did accept the faith. We've talked about it before, and if you could go back and listen to our podcast about the Native Americans, because we made it seem like, well, if you accept the faith and become one of us, then you'll be assimilated and whatever. But that didn't really happen, and it was never able to happen to Indians. The Indians who accepted the faith weren't treated
They were still
as
outsiders.
white people.
Yeah.
They were still Indians, and they were always treated as Indians until very, very recently. But France did send a lot of missionaries there, or at least the French Jesuits did. Mm-hmm. And they did do a lot of work, and they did convert a lot of Indians. But St. Isaac Jogues is one of the first American saints. I guess he's the first one who died in America to be named a saint.
Okay.
He was canonized 1930 by Pope Pius XI. He, as far as I can tell, he doesn't have any... he's not the patron of anything specific. But I would think that he would be the patron of Native Americans.
Yeah, seems like it. I mean, he suffered so much for their conversion.
Right. And his feast day is on October 19th. So he is celebrated in the Roman calendar. And, see, I don't get this. The feast day is celebrated on October 19th in the general Roman calendar and 26th of September in Canada. Does Canada have their own calendar?
Well, so some, and this is true even in the pre-Vatican II calendar. They would have what are called universal feasts, which meant they apply to the church everywhere, and then what are called particular feasts, which might apply within a certain country or for, like, let's say a certain order, like the Jesuits might have a particular feast on some days. But I've never heard of the same saint having a universal feast on one day and a particular feast on a different day. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I only had a very short time to look at this saint before. I didn't have as much prep time as I like, but I gave you the rundown. There's
but he's a good one.
There's a whole lot of more information.
I mean, he suffered so much
about him. Yeah.
For the conversion of Native Americans, and we practically need missionaries now again for for us, for this America.
We've got a bishop in the Amazon who has never baptized a single person. And he brags about it. And he's still a bishop. That's just terrible. That's
and Saint Isaac
Jogues shows
is
us,
like,
he's suffering martyrdom willingly twice,
suffered over and over again for the purpose of baptizing people.
Right. That's why he was there, to try to bring people into the Christian fold, to help bring them to God. And now we don't think it's important to bring people to God anymore. Yep. It's like, well, these people have never heard of God, so we shouldn't tell them about God, that's insane. God wants to be in everyone's heart. He doesn't want anyone not to know about him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want anyone praying to another God.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
God never wants that. You don't want anyone giving credit to a statue for his work.
Nope. That's like number one. And if you...
It was the very first commandment.
It's the very first commandment, but it's also the most often repeated commandment
Yeah. And it was what the Israelites kept doing wrong.
Yeah.
Throughout the Old Testament, they kept slipping from God's grace, and it was always that. It was
always because
idolatry.
they worshipped other gods.
We've had a strong Catholic Church, and we've never had a pope fall into idolatry until now.
Yeah.
And I guess we don't see what a blessing that was. Never, always having a strong pope who would never worship false gods. It's something that we never would have even thought about, even when we were kids, let alone 200 years ago.
Even corrupt popes never did that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. So when the Israelites would do this, I don't know much about Old Testament history and Old Testament timelines, but when the Israelites would say they would fall into idolatry, and then God would punish them in some way, and then eventually they would come back. Yeah. Now they're back in their land. How long does it take them before, how many generations pass before they make this mistake again? How often did this happen?
The thing is
2,000 years a long time, or is it not?
No, I mean, it happened several times within 2,000 years. The thing is, the first few times they didn't even get exiled. And, but, they would, maybe they would be, invaded or some bad, circumstance would fall on the land or something like that. And they would say, "Oh my, what's going on?" And then a prophet or somebody would say, "Well, it's because you are worshiping idols." And so they would turn back to God and start following the law. And then things would go well for them. And then they would kind of get fat, dumb, and happy and start thinking that, that they don't need God again. And they'd start worshiping false. It kind of went in cycles. And eventually there was, they were displaced. And then they were displaced for an even longer time.
Yeah.
And then at one point, and this is like kind of the most recent before the New Testament, the Greeks occupied them. And the Greeks didn't displace them. The Greeks just came in and occupied them and sort of, went and tore out the temple and forced everybody to worship Greek gods and stuff like that. And then that's when the Maccabees rose up and started to throw off the occupation of the Greeks and brought back, the worship at the temple and that kind of thing. And it was only a couple hundred years after that Christ came. And I think in part the Roman occupation was a protection against the threat of Greeks coming back.
That's what I always wondered, because we always read the gospel in light of them being occupied by Rome.
Yeah.
But I never read about any wars being fought with Rome. And I always thought, is this one of those cases where it's like, hey, we'll protect you, and here's the protection racket. You got to pay Rome tribute.
Send a tribute and stuff like that. Yeah, it was that kind of a thing.
Okay, so I guess there were probably a lot of Israelites who really despised the whole thing. They were like, we're the people of God. We should not be paying protection to Rome. We should depend on God.
Yeah.
And the leaders in Israel had betrayed them and allowed Romans to come in and occupy. It would be like the way Biden betrays us to China and the way China is kind of occupying America. Pretty much everything we have comes from China, and China lives off us. I guess we don't get anything in return there.
I mean, it was a little bit more involved in that. But, the thing is, God even told the Israelites, hey, if you follow my laws and if you obey me as your God, then
you won't need this.
You're not going to worry about any other country. You're going to loan money to other countries, and you're not going to borrow money from anybody. You're going to be the top of the heap. And they consistently they rejected that, even though whenever they were true to that, God was making good on His word.
Yeah. It's, when you think about what's happening right now in the Vatican, it's hard to think about because there's the only thing we can really compare it to is Israel's disobedience to God, because this has never happened in the Catholic Church before. And, I don't know, it's a little scary, but I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah.
Other than, pray to Saint Isaac Jogues for the Church and for the Pope, that we get this under control. And we get rid of the Pachamama coin that's being published by the Vatican.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. I never heard of that.
Yeah, the Vatican has a Pachamama coin.
Oh, man.
That's scary on so many levels.
Wow.
It's just, that's flat out idolatry. So.
Yeah, pray for a cleansing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all we got.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, folks, think about what we said, and as always,
circle the beads.
See you next week.
Bye, everyone.